Athanasios. Give a big round of applause. Okay, let's make it. Here, let me give you this.
Thank you very much. It's nice seeing you again. I don't need that. I will try to make my voice as loud as possible so that you can hear me, because the speakers are not doing a good work here. So before I forget, last year I was talking about regression therapy and what I'm doing. This year I'm not going to speak like that, and I'm not going to speak as a president of the European Association for Regression Therapy, which actually now is Earth Association. These two things are in the bookstore, my book and our DVD. They are next doors, whomever is interested, okay? Don't forget to take them. But I'm not going to talk about such a thing today. What I'm going to talk about is something absolutely fascinating that has... Jeff, I want you to close the lights. Yes, turn off the lights so you can see them. You cannot hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. I will try to... Yep. I will try to be as vocal as possible so that you can hear me well. I prefer that than having a microphone on my... can you all see the slides? Yes. Okay. So, I will talk to you about a phenomenon that is absolutely rare. It has never occurred in any paranormal, parapsychological literature. You have never heard of such a thing before. And the reason that you have not heard that thing before is because it was written only in Greece, in Greek, and unfortunately it has never been translated. We are talking about this little book. Okay? Now, I will explain a few things. The writer of this book was Paul Amadeus Dienach. He was a Swiss teacher from, I will go into this. Then it was translated by Professor George Papahadzis, and it was first published in 1966 in 1,000 copies only. And the second edition was in 1979, another 1,000 copies, and the third edition was in 2001, another 1,000 copies. So actually, it is only read by a few people, only in Greece, very few intellectuals. So nobody has ever heard this story before, and it's the first time it is actually presented in the English language. And I think the choice of the Edgar Cayce area here and was great, so that it will be presented where Edgar Cayce used to have his visions. So, you have to wear your seat belts, okay? And it's going to be a bit a strange history. But before that, I have to make a parenthesis. You know, I have to make a few criticisms about New Age futurology and how much energy and money has been spent on, you know, the end of the world, eschatology, the Third World War, 1999, the millennium, 2012, the Maya calendar, and the end of the world is approaching. Now we have a new thing. In 2036, Apophis is coming, and it's going to fall on the earth, and there we go all. So we love that thing, you know. How much money has been spent? Have you ever thought how much money has been spent on this? It is unbelievable. So now, some smart people of the New Age movement saw that, well, probably the end is not, the world is not coming to an end, but there will be a shift in consciousness. Huh? Everything is going to change. Did you see anything changing after the 2012? No, I didn't see anything changing. I didn't see any sensitivity anywhere. But as you will see in the book, it will take us 14 centuries. But there is going to be a shift in consciousness. But wait till you see. Before I proceed, before I go to the story, I have to read you something out of the father of American psychology. This guy was a very wise Harvard professor. Round about the accredited and orderly facts of every science, there ever floats a sort of dust cloud of exceptional observations, of occurrences minute and irregular and seldom met with, which it always proves more easy to ignore than to attend to. Anyone will renovate his science who will steadily look after the irregular phenomena. And when the science is renewed, its new formulas often have more of the voice of exceptions in them than of what was supposed to be the rules. So please keep that in mind. It is very important. Is there anybody a physicist here? Mathematician? Okay, there you are. Well, I'm not going to really talk about that, but I'm just going to pose a few questions here. This is the paradox of time, okay? So I'm just asking some questions. Is time an illusion?
Yes.
Do all things manifest contemporarily? That's a question. That's a question that eternalists usually put. You see, there are two schools of philosophy trying to interpret physics. The one school is the internalists, and the other one is the presentists. The presentists are saying that what is happening right now is important, and past and future are absolutely irrelevant. Eternalists, on the other hand, what they are saying is that everything is happening at the same time. So they go to the presentists and they ask them this question: how much time goes by in an hour? Okay. I think Einstein made a very nice joke back then, but if you say a second per second, this is not correct, because what is a second per second? You see, there is an oxymoron there, a contradiction there. So the eternalists, what they say is this: future events are as immutably fixed and impossible to change as past events. These are thoughts just to keep in mind before we start the presentation. Now, of course, there are cracks in time, okay? And we have seen clairvoyants and prophets throughout history, from the Iliad and Odyssey and the Bible and the Quran. The Apocalypse is all a vision of some vision of the future, but it's not always accurate. You know, not all of these prophets and all these clairvoyants were always accurate. They were sometimes accurate, sometimes not. Most of the times they were vague. The oracles of Delphi also. I will talk that on the second part, okay, at 2:30. So now in modern times we have Nostradamus. He made a few good guesses when he was alive. Okay? Swedenborg, Emanuel Swedenborg, Jacob Lobrer in Germany, Edgar Cayce here in America, Therese Neumann back in Germany. All these people had the ability to open the space-time and look through it and get some pictures and bring them back to us. Now, what are the parapsychological attitudes, okay? What parapsychology studies are common ESP phenomena, like, for instance, telepathy, the direct communication of one mind with another mind. I think of George, and then I go out the door, and there is George. After 6 months I hadn't seen him, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about George, and there he is. Clairvoyance, the ability to take information from the environment and pass it through your organism and bring it out. Remote viewing, the intentional clairvoyance. sending my awareness somewhere, targeting my awareness somewhere else, and getting the information from that place. Precognition, that's now a break in Yasu Petra, a break in consciousness. Psychokinesis, the ability to move things, the mind over matter, okay? And we have very rare phenomena, parapsychological, like bilocation. Empedocles and Pythagoras and Apollonius of Tyana were seen at the same time in different places and doing things. We have the Vardgård phenomenon. This is a Norwegian word which talks about the double, the etheric double that comes in the place before you come. It's an announcing apparition, actually. It's a very well-known phenomenon in Norway. The Doppelganger, it's a German word for the double, the etheric double. But another very rare phenomenon is the time sleep, okay? Now, the time sleep is something that physically someone is walking into the past. And let's go for it. Now you can focus on it, not yet. So there are cracks in time, and this has happened before. And what happens when we fall into a time loop? Now, have you ever heard of such a phenomenon before? Yes. I had a client of mine who had the same problem. She went in Cyprus, in Limassol, with her friend, and when they arrived there, they passed by a piano bar, and they saw the piano bar inside, and they said, "Why don't we sit here today?" And they were very tired from the trip, so they said, "Well, we go there tomorrow." When they went tomorrow, they were going up and down the street and couldn't find the piano bar. So they were estranged, and then they went to the pizza place, which was right next. That was a tourist shop, so they went to the pizza place, and the pizza guy goes pale. He says, "Yes, there was a piano bar here 3 years ago, and this guy moved over to another city. But how could you come here yesterday and see the piano bar and hear the piano playing?" And they were really, really estranged by the phenomenon. Now, this is a time sleep, which is actually a time sleep where you physically move into time. Our case is not that. It is a totally different case. But I will have to tell you a bit about Paul Amadeus Dienach. He was born in the countryside of Switzerland in 1884 in a German-speaking family. When young, he moved to Zurich. He became a school teacher. His first love, Anna, was forcibly married to a wealthy man and died 2 years after her marriage from tuberculosis in 1909. She gave birth to a child, a young boy. In 1917 now, Paul Amadeus Dienach had a fit of narcolepsy. That is, for 14 days, he had no conscious awareness of the environment. He was in a deep coma for no reason whatsoever. But in May of 1921, he had another such fit for 360 days. Okay? When he woke up in May of 1922, his mother had already died, and he had no close relatives anymore. He was on his own. So then, because everybody thought, the physicians of the time thought that he was sick, they advised him to go to a country with a better climate. And so he sold his property and went to Greece. And he moved there to Athens, right across the Acropolis, where he lived for the next 2 years of his life. He offered language lessons to young students in German and French. He then started writing his diaries about the images that came up during his narcoleptic fit. So in 1924, he left off from Greece to go die of tuberculosis, but at the same time, he gave all of his diaries to Professor Papahadzis, to George Papahadzis. He was not a professor at the time, he was a student. His writing is so obsessively romantic and full of lyricism that it makes a very difficult reading. He was quite inspired by the romantic spirit of the 19th century, and he was a very poetic person. Now, a few words about the translator. Professor Papahadzis was a student at the University of Athens at the time, and he had private lessons with Dienach. He saw something very deep and strange in his eye look and behavior that tantalized him. In 1924, he was given the 4 manuscripts, diaries, in German. 2 of them were his diaries from Switzerland, and 2 of them were the diaries of his memories from the future, rewritten in Athens. And please ask me, when I'm through with this, why they are rewritten, because I don't know if I will have the time to tell you now. Mr. Papahadzis started translating those diaries in 1926 and concluded the translation in 1940. It took him 14 years to translate. Now, he was never asked to translate the diaries. This guy gave him the diaries, I'm going off to die, just keep them. He didn't tell him publish them or anything. But when he started reading the diaries, this guy got excited by what he saw. So he decided to translate them. So he published them for the first time in 1966 in 1,000 copies. But then he was the dean of the Pandion University of Athens and the vice president of the Council of State, which is, we have 2 courts, the Supreme Court and the Council of State. He was at the top of his career. He was 65 at the time, 60-something. Nobody could kick him out from his position. That's why he published them. Okay? So even, you know, he had the prestige. So now, one of the most spectacular stories ever written. So let me summarize. This is the synopsis. Paul Amadeus Dienach slept in a rare state of consciousness called narcolepsy or lethargic sleep for almost a year. When he recovered, he came back with memories of another person. Actually, his future embodiment. Wow. That future personality was a physicist named Andreas Northam, who actually lived in the year 3905 AD, 3906 AD. At that year that he was sleeping, he went into the body of Andreas Northam. Now, the physicist of the future had an accident involving a near-death experience. Not a near-death experience, he actually died. And he had been, when he recovered, he was possessed by the personality of Paul Amadeus Dienach, okay? So it was actually his former persona. So it is not a physical like the time sleep, we sleep in time as we are, but the spirit, the soul, the psyche of that man took over totally the body of his future embodiment. Now, what happened in 3905 AD? There was an accident. Andreas Northam is driving a Lincoln. Now, whenever you see orange terms and verbs and words, they are from that era. They are new words. We do not know these words now, okay? So a Lincoln is an individual flying machine and crashes fatally. During his transference to the Molson Hospital, he died, but he was immediately frozen before the resuscitation team finally brought him back to life. In that way, no brain damage occurred. Now, I would not have noticed that. I've read the book a few years ago. Now that I was rereading it and making notes on it, I discovered this because you can see this immediately frozen. I read the book by Dr. Parnia. You all know him because he's writing books on near-death experiences. He's a cardiologist, and he wrote a very excellent book this year, 2013. It's called Erasing Death. In this book, he explains that science has evolved in terms of resuscitating. Why? Because some people died out in the snow and they didn't have brain damage, and they could be resuscitated hours after their physical death without having brain damage. Actually, the brain damage is damaged within 4 minutes from anoxia. So the fact that these people are freezing them at that time, it certainly could not be known in 1922 when he wrote his diaries. Okay? That's very important. So let's go back. He's taken to the Molson Hospital in northern Italy, and then he sensed himself when he woke up in an alien and unknown environment. What he looks around is totally strange for him. People are wearing different clothes from his time. The decoration is different, the lighting is different, everything is different from the clinics of his time. So during the recovery, he saw himself in the mirror and he had a profound shock. He didn't recognize his face. He was looking at another face and he was shocked. And he was like, God help me. He started praying. He wouldn't believe what was happening. He was shocked. He was seeing another person looking back at him from the mirror. When he spoke, no one seemed to understand him, and they brought in specialized linguists to comprehend him. They concluded that he was speaking an archaic Germanic language. Now, what are the symptoms of Andreas? He cannot recognize any of his loved ones and speaks a foreign tongue that no one comprehends. He suffers from another ailment. He never sleeps. So while the body of our 20th century, a Swiss teacher, is constantly asleep, this guy is constantly awake. And they have, all the physicians are examining him, and they say, this is impossible, this cannot be happening. I mean, it could happen for 3 days, for 1 week, it cannot be going on for months. They couldn't explain the phenomenon. The physicians of the future examine him thoroughly, but they cannot explain, and they think it's a consequence of his 15-minute death. They assume it is a rare, also his speaking, they assume it is a rare form of xenoglossy. For those of you who do not know what xenoglossy is, it is the ability to speak a foreign language without ever being taught about it. And it is one of the strong evidence we have about the reincarnation hypothesis, when we have people, when we hypnotize them and we see that they are speaking a foreign language, and we can prove that they never were taught about this language. Anyway, now he's recovering, okay? And his good friends are brought in, but he recognizes none. Stefan, his best friend from early childhood, is nothing but a stranger for him. Dr. Geyer, his professor and mentor from childhood, is also not recognized. When they cannot understand what he is talking about, they ask him to write down his thoughts. Stefan recognizes that this is not Andreas's handwriting. So after his physical recovery, he is taken to a resort in northern Italy near the lake Como. It's still called Como by Stefan and Geyer. There they realize, these guys, that this man is indeed a personality from the 20th century, and they try to teach him what has happened in those 20 centuries. The Regenswaage. Regenswaage is our special three-dimensional holographic chambers that are usually used as the basic means of teaching history. Also, there were analogous book versions for home use and handicapped persons. Now, Reigen and Zwage are the last names of the inventors of this technology. And he describes a scene, and they go to a dark theater inside and they sit, and when they sit, they get seated, suddenly everything goes dark, and it's like a planetarium, we would say today, and they see all kinds of things developing around them. They can even smell what is happening. Sounds and everything is so realistic. And actually he saw there the French Revolution of 1789. So now, basically, this book is a love story. Okay? It's a big love story. I'm not going to stress the love part of it, though. In essence, it is his love with Anna. The last time he met her in their secret place, close by their village, very close to a lake, they exchanged promises for eternal love and dedication. Never do that to your girlfriend or to your boyfriend. You may get in trouble, I tell you. Don't do it. So, Anna was forcibly, as we know, married without her consent to a wealthy man and died at a very young age. But when Dienach met Sylvia, Andreas Northam's girlfriend, in the 40th century, he immediately recognized her as being his reincarnated Anna. Immediately he fell in love with her. Okay? When he looked in her eyes, even though they looked different, of course, he immediately fell in love with her. And it was then that they fell in love and concluded what had not been concluded in the 20th century. So that's where they slept together and they had a wonderful sex life together. And more details later on. Now, let us turn our attention to what concerns us most. What happened in our times and in the course of time till the 40th century. Now, these are, you see, this is a book that you have to really find the paragraphs and note them and take them, and it's not written for our minds. I have made these presentations precisely as a summary of this book. It is not written historically speaking. So what happened there? What do the historians of the 40th century talk about us? They say that the dominance of the European continent falls apart, and after World War I, the Americans gradually take over. Emphasis is now given not in spiritual or intellectual matters, but rather on technological and economic development, with massive production of products and an affluence unprecedented in history. And while the standard of living is greatly improved, the cultural improvements are conversely proportional. Low-quality mass productions for the masses are distributed. Classic education is abandoned in favor of technical and practical training. During this dehumanizing period of the era of mechanization, the way of treating workers, even supervisors and managers, was degrading and inhumane. These people were always under pressure, in a real frenzy, led some people to psychic and mental disease that even led to suicide. I just have to remind you what happened in Shanghai a few years ago when the people who were making iPhones couldn't handle the pressure and they started jumping out of the windows of the skyscraper. What did the smart golden boys do? They put net all over the place. I mean, they didn't change anything. They just put nets. Yes. I mean, so in that era of the New World Order, now listen, New World Order is a Bush administration term. It is not a term used in the 20s. So how would these people know about the New World Order if that what he is saying is not true? So he says that those totalitarian states were fighting over which tendency will govern, the right or the left, in terms of social policies. Eh? But they call them totalitarian states. You get my point. We, today, are considered totalitarian for them. The people that were valued in this time were not Goethe, Da Vinci, Dante, Pasteur, Einstein, Wagner, but instead they were other newly introduced idols. This is verbatim from the book. Celebrities, comedians, dancers, boxers, soccer players, ruthless Croesuses like Onassis, escorts and ragged, unclean, unkept, scruffy instrument players. This was written in 1922. Don't forget. How could this man have written such a thing? Predicted the rock movement and the heavy metal and all this. In the human agent, these people could only see numbers, productivity, power, and profit. And that was the reason, you will see later on what happened. Their view of the world was anthropocentric, geocentric, and had no value for the other living creatures.
Yes.
Now, these are just synopsises, okay? Now, if you have a camera, please, you have to take this a picture. Not yet. Wait till I will tell you when the slide is through. In 2204 AD, humans managed to migrate on Mars. Now, who the hell would have thought of such a prospect in 1922? Von Braun, the Nazi scientist, threw the rocket in the 40s. Sputnik in the 50s, the Apollo program in the 60s. In 22, how would anyone even consider the idea of a colony in Mars? Now, in 2204, humans managed to migrate on Mars. They managed to build settlements and colonies on the planet. They managed to create the conditions for a bearable living. It was actually a very difficult living over there. But the temporary taming of natural forces lasted only for 60 years. In 2265 AD, a terrible physical disaster took place that lasted for months and killed 20 million people. Only a few hundred made it back to Earth to share the story. Now, please take a picture, print it, make a frame, and give it to your grandchildren. And ask them to give it to their grandchildren. It's only 8 generations away.
On Mars?
Unfortunately, this is the first concrete date we have in this book, you know, because he's generalizing. So please take a picture of this, print it out for your grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren. Never go to Mars. Okay? Okay. Now, of course, we have been talking about this thing, but we really don't take it seriously, do we? The scientists of the time did not foresee the time bomb of overpopulation. Authorities did not restrict in time cultures and people from refraining child upbringing. Catholic and Protestant churches did not help to this direction, and suddenly, as if a flood took place, the situation got out of hand. Conditions were constantly deteriorating, and there were upheavals, wars, and uprisings. Moving into the 23rd century, the white people demanded from the colored and the Chinese to restrain themselves. They, on the other hand, were defending themselves by claiming that they were mostly the victims. So the overpopulation had brought years and years of hunger and terrible conditions for the populace. Then a series of wars started, in which most of the time the whites dominated because they had superior weapons, but the millions of dead people would not suffice to reduce the constantly growing population. Even after all this warfare, the problem was evident. So then the unavoidable came. The time when the world as we know it came to an end. In 2309 AD, there was a thermonuclear controlled attack by the whites, which destroyed most of Europe as we know it. Scandinavian and Baltic countries were not destroyed. Actually, all of the continents were destroyed. This war killed billions of people and devastated most of the continents of the earth. From 2320 to 2350 AD, migrating people from the north started to take over the old lands. Now, I'm not getting into details, but for instance, Rome is non-existent, Florence is non-existent, Venice is not existent, nothing of what we know, Paris is not existent. All this has been destroyed. It's been annihilated. Unfortunately, there are no details in the book about the American continent. What they say that is some people who survived from South America moved to this area, to Europe. So now they set the grounds for a new beginning. In 2394, there was a European Constituent Assembly. The next year, it was a worldwide Constituent Assembly. And the next year after that, it was the establishment of the world, the global Rechtsstaat, which means a commonwealth with law and order. They thought that the years that preceded them were barbarian. They denounced that era. They thought it is barbarian. They called it prehistoric, and they denounced the calendar, and they changed the new calendar now, and 2396 becomes year 1 for them. Okay? So they end the prehistory, and they begin the new calendar. Prehistoric times are considered barbaric because their civilization was based on greed, profit, and private property. Never again, till the 40th century, there will be private property or profit for anyone. So this is quite anti-American, I guess, but you have to listen to it. If this is true or not, I do not know. Time will show. Now, responsible for this shift in perspective is a charismatic political leader called John Tering. We don't know him. We don't know who he is. He will probably be there at the time. His vision to terminate human conflict and set the grounds for a peaceful era is finally becoming true. The era now is called Pax Oecumenica Teringa, and the language spoken hereafter throughout the globe is a mixture of Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian. So the people who actually managed to survive this terrible disaster, they mixed together and a new language came out of it. So, excuse me. So, this is the end of part 1. And we can either take a 4-minute break to visit the toilet or get some glass of water or whatever, or we keep on going, whatever you want. Keep on going? Okay. So, let's go. Now, we said, okay, let's, first of all, do you have any questions up to here? I mean, did you?
What about the diary? You said to remind you, is it too soon or?
Okay, okay, let me remind you about that before we go on. The diary. What about the diary? Okay, when Papahadzis translated the documents, okay, he had them in an apartment in Athens. But at that time, in 1944, the Germans occupied Greece, the Nazis, okay? But they started losing the war, so they started evacuating Athens, and so the guerrillas were coming behind them and shooting at them, killing them as they were retreating. So because there was a turmoil, he took a bag and he put the translations inside, but he did not put inside the original German documents. Okay? So now the guerrillas go into the house and they see these documents there, and they see that they are in German, and they thought that this guy is cooperating with the Germans. So they take off all the original diaries. That's why we have no other, it's only available in Greek, because the original German document was taken by the guerrillas, and we never know what had happened. And also I said, remind me that they are rewritten.
Yes.
Okay. Why did I say that? Because Dienach, when he took over the body of Northam in the future, he was keeping a diary there. So it's actually written, the first time this diary was written in the future. And now, when he woke up, he rewrote the whole diary in Athens. You get it? So actually, he had a very, very strong memory. You cannot imagine how many terms are there. There's a whole lexicon on the back side of it, a lot of new terms, and a lot of things. Okay? So, shall we go further? Okay. Now, their calendar, as we said, started with number 1 year, and they have 2 eras. In the 40th century, they have the old era, not prehistory, we are prehistory. They have their old era and their new era. Eldrere, Nogere. Now, year 1 is 2396 AD, and the new calendar stands on the fall equinox on the 23rd of September, of our September, and has a Latin counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? Each month has 30 days, and there are no week divisions and no concept of Sundays. At 498 now, the movement of the 200 and the building of the Rosendahl. The Rosendahl is their capital. Is their capital somewhere located in southeastern Europe. Okay? Now, it seems from reading this book that it must be the area of Greece, because that's southeastern Europe actually. It's the final peninsula of Europe. And the fact that he mentions that when he crosses some cities have the Greek names that they have today as well. So it seems that it must be somewhere there. But he actually does not specify that. The reason, though, that he chose to go to live under the Acropolis probably is related to this. He wanted to see this place and to compare it to the place that will be in 40 centuries. So the movement of the 200 now, the 200 people decided that the human consciousness is limited. They said that we know the brain is underworking. We have to study this. So they created institutes. One of them was the Aidersen Institute. And they created institute for the development of the human consciousness, the understanding of the human consciousness and the extending of it. That was the purpose of those institutes there. So what they did is they went and meditated for hours. They were actually non-socializing, you know, they were out of the community, let's say, and they were there doing this. And they took them a lot of years to develop these abilities. But they were meditating, praying, and so on. You will see in a while. So in 1986, that is a very important date for them, the breakthrough comes. That is the shift in consciousness that all these guys were writing about 2012. Well, it's going to be 3382. I tell them, okay, they're a few years back. Now, Volki, Alexis Volki, is one of the people who is in the Aidersen Institute, and he finally makes a breakthrough. And he develops the overseen suns. That's how it's called in that time in the future. It is the new era of consensus gentium universalis. They use a lot of Latin, by the way. So what he did was he developed the supervision. We will get into this in a moment. Another important thing is that 100 years after he discovered that, another miracle took place, which was the blossoming of the blue roses, but I will tell you that in a while. Now, let's go about to see how the story starts. When he, the guy, the physicist of the future, was taken to recover, they took him to a Sives hostel, or Kives, actually Kives hostel, or Kivesheim, which is the place where all people go. Now, those are the hotels of all civilians that have concluded their duty service for the state. Okay? You will see what that is. The duty service is actually a mandatory employment for all youngsters from 17 to 19. After they conclude school, they go there. They work for there, and they are called jezels. That's the term in the future, which is actually meaning partner. So everyone who works is a partner. They work wherever there is a need for them to work, usually in the Glothners. Those are humongous energy plants or werkstätten, which are work sites for building construction or building roads or whatever, and they wear troyes, specific uniforms, so that they can be distinguished from the kivas. So we have the jezels and the kivas. The kivas are the civilians, okay? It comes from the Latin civilian, civis, and the jezels are the workers. And they are free from there on, as soon as they conclude their service to the state, they are free to do whatever they wish. They are free to pursue any study they like, and from here on they have the ability to excel in what their soul desires. The civis can always be consumers of art, science, vacations, and whatever they wish. However, people who dedicate part of their time and offer services for others are considered very highly by the majority, and they are having a very high esteem. There are a lot of people who are nurses, a lot of people who are medical doctors, a lot of people. They do it not for money. They do it not for. They do it because they like it. They like to offer. Okay. And one thing that I did not mention, it was not always that way. In the beginning, they were working for 40 years, then they were working for 30 years, then for 20, until they managed, with their technological development, to reduce the state work for 2 years. So how is the economy organized? There is no private ownership. You can have whatever you want. It can be yours. You can give it away when you are through it with it, when you don't need it. But you can always ask for it and go and take it without money. Technical achievements have mastered the abundance of energy and have assured the well-being for every human. Affluence and efficacy are enjoyed by everyone. Supply and demand are foreseen by the statistical service. Labor is now limited to the 2 years service and is mandatory. Everyone has access to all goods and commodities. Now, energy supply. Most of the energy is supplied by the Glothners. Those are massive nuclear reactor plants, and they provide energy to all the planet. They also utilize massive amounts of energy from underneath the earth, and they have huge pipelines that supply Northern Europe with an unknown to us form of energy, a raw material that comes directly from the Atlantic with a pipeline into the Glothners, but he doesn't understand what this technology is all about. So they utilize solar, wind, and water power wherever that is possible, but it's obsolete. They have it only for reasons of remembering the old technologies. The heart of the energy production is the continent of Australia. All of Australia is Glothners. Food supply. While in the first centuries of the old era, they resort to genetically modified foods that are mostly produced through the laboratories of mass food production plants, they then resort to more traditional ways of agricultural and livestock production. At the 40th century, there are no icebergs on the poles. And what were once the deserts and the steppes have been all cultivated and inhabited. We are talking about billions of people still. There are billions of people. Now, communications. There is one little passage there in that book. It says that he was outside, and when he walked in the house, he saw a message on the phone. And at that time, he's talking about a device through which he can see and listen to her love's message, who is talking to him, and he can see her lips, and oh my God, her blonde hair, and how beautiful her eyes is, and all this. But that in 1922. Transportation. The safest, fast, and main way of transportation is done through the air. Linsons are the small vehicles, air vehicles for short distances. Dunners are huge, cigar-like planes that, with no wings, that not only host thousands of passengers and cargo, but they're Linsons as well. And they fly extremely fast from continent to continent, and they have entertainment centers in them as well. The classic autoroutes, though, still exist, but they are far different than ours. And they are called bilways, which are huge autostradas, interstates, excuse me for the Italian here, of the day, with width of a half a mile at least, some of them are 1 mile wide, and a length of several thousand miles. He is talking about a road who starts from Portugal and goes all the way to Siberia. And it's almost a mile wide, but there are lanes with forests in between, and each lane is for different vehicles. So the rayoses, the big ones, he said that the big ones are like if you would take a skyscraper from New York and bring it down, and you could put it on a truck, that's how big the rayoses are. They're whole cities that are moving intercontinentally, okay? And they are moved by traction. On the contrary, velos are very small, two-wheeled vehicles like the motorbikes we do have today. And they actually fly over the road with magnetic energy. Have any of you seen the movie Thrive on YouTube? Please note it down. The technology is still here. It is here. It is the oil companies that they don't want to use this technology. So if you see that movie, you will realize how good this guy is in reality, actually. So let's see about the social structure and control. Now, Redstad, as we said, is the universal commonwealth. Riksdag is a representative collective assembly where they talk about their problems of production and what is going on, and they look after production. There are no political and judicial institutions, believe it or not, no lawyers. Yes. And no politicians. No authoritarian power exists in the form of the government as we know it. No delinquency, deviant behavior, or criminal acts are witnessed. It seems that social control has been achieved through internalization of certain principles. So socialization must have been effective. How about social stratification? Well, the highest, these people actually, what they have is, excuse me, the top are the Lorfes, officials who are intellectual and spiritual leaders. They are given huge estates, beautiful villas. That's their privilege as compared to the others who have smaller houses. Electes, they are lower against intellectual spiritual leaders. The tiltes, the presteskab. The presteskab are the priests and the clergy. They are also considered highly. Then there are the office partners. Those are the people who do the work in offices. You know, they control the statistics and look after whatever is going on. And then is the parvenus. The parvenus is the last ones, the kives that do not engage in altruistic services. If you finish with your mandatory service, you can enjoy life. You can have children, you can travel all the time, you can enjoy restaurants, but you do not engage in any altruistic endeavor, then you are considered a parvenus. It's not such a great, I mean, those people who offer themselves altruistically are the ones that are higher in the social ladder. Now, let's go to religion. People are free to exercise their religious feelings. Temples of most religions are built everywhere. Everywhere. Wherever you go, you see temples. The funny thing is that there is also, there are temples of ancient Greek, the Katheon, you know, the 12 gods. I mean, they do have temples and people still go there. They have ancient Egyptian temples. Now, differentiations and variety do not matter for them, because the scope of all these ancient religions was in essence the same. The need to quench the spiritual thirst after the discovery of Nibelwich, which I will talk about in a while. This is the new add-on ability of the human mind to extend itself, is clearly understood at the time. However, Christianity prevails. Even though now the Muslim religion is the fastest growing, I think, in terms of expansion. But at that time, it seems that Christianity has prevailed everywhere, because wherever he went, to all these big cities he went and visited, he saw hundreds of temples, Christian temples, and statues of Christ. So that means that it has prevailed. And however, it's not as we know it today. People at that time do not accept the editing that took place by the councils and the cutting of the scripts. Dogmas and denominational fractions have no place there. Faith is totally a personal matter and is expressed and experienced in a totally personal way. What has been kept is the essence of Christianity and the principles of brotherhood, love, altruism, forgiveness, mercy, and all these wonderful things. People very often gather and participate in mass services that take place very often. Actually, every day, when the sun rises and when the sun sets, they turn to the sun and they sing hymns out to, to thank for that they are there and for the goods they have and all this. Every day you see, and you hear the bells of the churches ringing, and they have liturgies every day. Now, from religion to sex. Okay, that's quite a landing. Marriage as we know it today is non-existent. Youngsters are strongly discouraged to have any sexual encounter before they conclude their duty to the service, to the state, okay, their mandatory work. After that, once they become kives, then they can freely engage in a relationship. These people seem to be far more naive than our early 20th century visitor. He says that they are naive. You can really fool them. They are very, very naive. They will not indulge in sexual intercourse unless there is a very strong feeling of love connecting them with their mate. Actually, this guy of the 20th century is saying that the people, in the 20s were very sexually active as compared to these guys. So, what they are awaiting, these people, as is the Liebwirch. Okay, the Liebwirch is a candid and gentle, without self-interest love that resembles an adolescent love. Okay, and that is what they are waiting for. And sometimes, they don't have a mate, and they say, "Oh, it takes time for the Liebwirch to come," and they grow older, and still they have not found their mate. This love is a reflection of the Samith. We will get there in a while. Its source is a transcendent reality, quite big and overwhelming. This love has its roots in the thirst and nostalgia for the fine, the pure, the essence. People are allowed to mate as they wish, and it seems that their education and socialization is so effective that they mate only if they have feelings for the other person. They are not obliged to stay with their mate forever. They can always change. Falling in love with another person is acceptable, but they should immediately announce that to their partner. I don't tell them. So. Sincerity and clarity are expected in the relationship. When finally two people decide that they are ready to have offspring, they submit their request to the Office of Statistics. They cannot do it like that. They have to get approval, because there is a very strict control of the population not to happen the same thing that we had in the 24th century. So how about physical exercise and fitness? There are certain physical fitness centers, actually very many, and swimming pools and all kinds of sports. But what's the difference? These people with their sluggish temperament and lack of any fighting motives despise the chase of records and have no prizes for the winners. They have no winners. So this tennis guy who won 4 million the other day, he wouldn't take a dime up there, okay? Competition, as we understand it in nowadays, is totally foreign to their way of thinking and playing. So actually that way of thinking is totally foreign to the American way of thinking. As you can see, it's totally different. Now, what is the most important development in the Neuere, the New Age? After years of meditational practices, a shift in human consciousness takes place that will change the world. It is called the oversynance and the ability to transcend the senses, the ability to oversee. You don't need your senses, your 5 senses. The practitioner, the 70-year-old Alexis Volki, managed to make the breakthrough by extending the abilities of the human mind on the 6th of September of 1382. Supervision and the acquisition of new conceptual properties has become a reality. This is not the privilege of Volki alone. In the next 36 hours, this structural shift started happening to other people as well. Do you remember the 100th monkey? Okay. In the next 36 hours, hundreds of people started having the same illumination as he did. But most of them did not survive. They died because they couldn't handle all the incoming information. And there is a lady now, I don't remember her name, a girl, 19 years old, she died because she could not handle that. And they have a statue for her, and they have a day for her every year. They go to her place where she committed suicide, and they leave flowers there for her memory. So supervision is something far greater than intuition, clairvoyance, or prophetic vision. It has nothing to do with this. Those are just small ideas. Supervision is the immediate enlightenment which is added upon the other mental and spiritual qualities of humans. It is the immediate knowledge and the direct communion with the light. What was Socrates telling, and Plato writing, and Christ talking about? What they were telling us then, to go to the light, that the light is the true essence of everything, and that we are just a reflection of the real world. We are not the real world. The real world is out there. So the direct communion with the Licht, that is the supervision. And Nibelwirch is that ability which was acquired by Volki. It came as an improvement and add-on to the former mental and intellectual capacities that we already had. What were once considered as metaphysical or transcendental are now from now within the realm of the positive scientific thinking. Skeptic.com finito, out of order, you know, error 404. They go out of business. Yes, finally. It will take a long time. You see, it will take more than 16 centuries to get rid of them. Reuswirch. Reuswirch is an ineffable happiness of supreme level, because these people, when they come into touch with this supreme reality, they have what the near-death experiencers have. They cannot translate it here into this physical matter. They cannot share their experience with this down-to-earth world. So it is so overwhelming that the people cannot digest the incoming happiness and the subsequent understanding of the newly acquired qualities. In extreme cases, it leads to self-destructive behavior. And a lot of people They said, why waste time here? Huh? Well, I mean, the happiness is over there. Why waste? So let's go die. And they committed suicide by the hundreds. Okay, people started committing suicide because they thought that they would rush and go back to the essence. And actually, the skeptic.com found a way to attack to the Aidersen Institute and say, you are doing nonsense and this is not working and you are killing people beforehand. And they had to restrain this movement and to break it down. So this fundamental transformation was actually had biological and anatomical changes in the brain. That could be seen now, that there was a clear anatomical change. So this is the end of Homo sapiens sapiens as we know it. From now on, a new form of humans will be dominating the globe, and they will be called Hominis occidentalis novis in plural, or Homo occidentalis novus in singular. This is the new species of our ascendants. Okay? Now, but what is that people glimpsed at which the help of the supervision? What is it that they glimpsed? What were they looking at? Please, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay, that's okay, don't worry. It is the summit. And what is the summit? It is the sum of whatever exists. It is the objective, multi-dimensional, ontological reality. Its essence is non-penetratable by our senses, our mental capacities and logic. It is the great reality that through Nibelwirch people now know for certain its existence. This knowledge was enough to ease the metaphysical quest for humans for spiritual salvation. What was once metaphysical or transcendental is now fitting into place. It is within the puzzle. Within the summit, one can find, within the summit, one can find the afterlife rewards for virtue. Sorry, but it doesn't work. Probably it's closed. Okay. The divine providence. The certainty of immortality and reincarnation. An acceptance of a higher order of the world and the exclusion of the reductionist mechanistic view of it. What else is art but the constant effort of the invisible to become visible? That is the essence of art, is to take what is unseen and break it down here. But how indeed could a painter depict what he saw up there? Or a sculptor, how could he chiseled on marble a statue that he has seen up there? The architecture, all these arts are boosting at that time. They are boosting. The music is far more beautiful than what we are listening to. The poetry is still wonderful, and philosophy is still very, very strong and flourishing. Theater plays everywhere, and museums everywhere, and art exhibitions everywhere, and dancing, and arenas, but not in the modern sense. Whole colonies are built around the earth. We have a lot of colonies around the globe. Like we have now, today we have spaceships, and they're going around the earth, the satellites. We have many of them right then. A lot of people live above the earth. And those colonies are fully inhabited by a lot of people. So now some of the prominent figures of their time could be compared to prominent people of our time. You cannot listen. Okay, I got it down. So we have Larsen. He's the poet of their day, the best poet around. Their philosopher is Domenicus Albani. Their Da Vinci is Knut Valdemar. Their Galileo is Astrom. Their Beethoven is Valmadel. Their Bach is Ruthermere. Their Michelangelo is Nichtenfeld. There are hundreds of names in this book, but there is no reason to mention these names because we don't know them. I mean, if somebody in the age of Plato was talking to him about Galileo or Michelangelo, he wouldn't know a thing. So I'm just mentioning these names. It's too far away in the future, but it is very important to know that they are there and then they are written. The Rosendal now, it's the capital, as we said, of that Redstad. Now, what happened out there? At the Easter of 1086, a miracle took place at that school. A 70-year-old gentleman named Kostia Rundulov had witnessed the miracle of seeing a new species of roses blossoming after 50 years of experimentation. His roses are sky blue, glowing, and when people see them, they are shocked by their beauty. They are fluorescent of sky blue. So whenever some person looks at them, they are astonished, and they can only grow in the Rosendal, in that area. They cannot be grown anywhere else in the world. It's the only place when they can grow them. And not everybody can grow them. Only the people who are equivalent and ready to nourish such flowers. Okay? So, the déjà vu love story. You see what can happen if you give a promise to a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Make sure. Somebody may listen to you and make your promise true. So, for Dienach, Sylvia is the future reincarnation of his former love, Anna. We should note here that even though Andreas Northam was flirting and trying to seduce Sylvia, he never succeeded. He was trying over and over again to seduce her, to make her his girlfriend, and she would never succumb. And then she yielded only when the body of Andreas Northam was taken over by the personality of Paul Dienach. Now, in the spring of 3906 AD, they fly into the Alps. And as they walk by there, they find themselves in the precise little spot that was their meeting place in the 20th century. At that point, he realizes that what has happened and understands that the promise had come true. So when he returns home, he writes his final page on the diary of this experience, and then his mind finally drifted into sleep after 360 days without sleep. And that's the end of our story.